Happens to the
But
best of
thankfully,
us.
though, I already have like a silly personality, so when I laugh it off, I'm like, I totally forgot what I was saying. And I'll say it live TV.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one. Okay, that'll do it. That'll do it. Okay, I'll use that one.
You're like,
Hello there.
You're on.
Hello, everybody. I just came to sit in here for a few minutes because I gotta do this. I gotta do this little song here. Baby Vetus is coming into the world hopefully tonight. Our youngest son's girlfriend has gone into labor, and hopefully baby Vetus will be here by midnight. So if he's born by midnight, he's born on my father's birthday, and that's who Josh's middle name Frank comes from. So good luck, son. I hope you're watching, but ha ha ha, we're gonna have a lot of fun for the next 18 years. And tonight we have Chris Hoerster here today. Did I get that right?
Yes,
Okay.
close enough.
Hoerster?
Hoerster.
Hoerster. Okay. Now I have it phonetically in my head. And then somebody that we haven't seen in a long time. Go ahead, state your name.
Adela Fernandez.
And our current other lovely guest, state your name.
Ed English.
All right. Well, anyways, they are going to talk about the code next again. You know, this is part 2 of the show. It'll be the informative. And so I'm going to disappear. Marilyn will be in here in a few minutes, and she'll be taking this chair. So anyways, we're going to try to explain code next to you in layman's terms as best as we can. And push, Katie, push. It's going to be a big old head coming out of there. I hope you can handle it. Yeah, poor Katie.
Well, where to start? Ed, I guess you want to give us a rundown on where we're at. I guess let's start with the petition because that's probably the most important thing right now.
It is a big deal, and we've done quite well. We are very, very close to the finish line. The legal requirements are 20,000 validated, registered Austin voters inside the city limits, Austin, and we currently have about 27,000. That sounds great, and it is. Right. But one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that they have to be validated. That 27,000 is a raw number. Our validation runs about a week behind. Currently, we're very, very close to actually having pre-verified 20,000, but we're still working on it. We still want that cushion. If you haven't signed yet, please sign the petition. There's plenty of ways, various means to get a hold of the petition and get it back in.
And you'll turn in a lot extra.
What are some of those means?
Well, we are, again, petitioning at the libraries on the weekends. That's a little story in that we can get into in a few minutes. You can also download the petition at indyaustin.org, and it's spelled INDY, austin.org. Download it, sign it. We can't do a petition of this type online and then mail it in immediately because we would like to officially file the completed petition drive with the city clerk on the 22nd.
Okay.
And how many signatures do you already have?
We currently have about 27,000 raw signatures.
Wow.
Our validation.
That's a big number.
That is a big number, and that's actually on the surface 7,000 more than you would think we need. But it takes time. We pre-validate the signatures, and that takes some time. Any good petition drive will do that, so that when those petitions are turned into the city clerk, you know you've got it. You're not up for any kind of surprises. So we pre-validate. That takes about a week, and our currently validated rate is very, very close to, if not over 20,000, because I haven't got an update on the numbers in about the last 24 hours. So we may have actually crossed the line, but don't take this as anything official. If you haven't signed, do it. If you have one you haven't mailed in, get it mailed in. Go to the libraries, turn it to someone with a clipboard there. You'll see them working outside. It's
You need how many signatures?
We need 20,000 registered City of Austin voters verified.
And you want to turn in extra.
Oh, absolutely.
Of course,
Always
with a cushion.
You always give yourself some cushion in case there's any type of legal challenge or any type of dispute over how a particular section of the signatures may have been collected.
We all got some free publicity lately. I guess our city employees tried to infringe on your rights.
They did. And it started about 3 or 4 Saturdays ago. We elected to have our petitioners work at the local libraries, at the City of Austin libraries. And unbeknownst to us, we were supposed to have been notified. We were not. The city took it upon themselves, the head of the city's library department, to send an email to every library in the City of Austin telling them to ask anyone petitioning for Code Next that might be on their property the following day. This email went out on a Friday. We were scheduled to petition on a Saturday, to leave the property. That we were not allowed there. We were not welcome there.
On our property.
On our property,
Public
City of Austin,
Yeah.
public property. And we did have a number of people across the city basically asked to leave the property. We did have one individual that was, okay.
Come on, Sam. Jump on.
Okay.
Put Marilyn in the middle. Marilyn
Whoever.
will go in the middle.
Is Miss Marilyn
And
here?
then you and Sam will share a microphone over here, so make sure you kind of turn to the microphone.
Hi, Sam.
Hey, how are you?
How are
Put it
you?
up in there.
Come on, Sam.
More, I'll just put you a chair.
How are you?
That's okay.
How are you?
That's going to be Marilyn's chair. Yours,
We'll
and
we'll
we're going to get
slide
another
Marilyn
chair
in
for
here
him.
and we'll.
No, Sam will come up.
Why?
Sam's coming off?
That's it, sir.
Well,
Why?
That's it, sir.
I'll finish the story on the libraries here.
Okay, we're
Finish the
listening.
library.
We're right in the
That's
middle of
okay,
the
that's
story.
okay, because I thought it was just such an infringement of our rights. The city notified every library to ask anyone there petitioning for Code Next to leave the property. This was about 3 or 4 Saturdays ago. Well, that's clearly a violation of our constitutional rights on a federal level, state level, and even the city charter has a provision in it to allow an individual to petition to put a ballot initiative before the public as long as they're not creating a safety hazard or in some way, shape, or form making it difficult to get into and out of the library. That never occurred. But there was a...
Before council?
Well, these were people who were petitioning for Code Next on that particular Saturday.
Okay.
And police were called in one case, issued a warning to one individual. Most people, without any incident, left. We have 3 attorneys working for us pro bono. Former county judge, Bill Elshire, is one of them. He immediately responded with a request to cease and desist to the city, which they sat on for quite a long time. There's been a lot of legal back and forth, but Eureka, they have rescinded that request, or that demand, I suppose might be a way to put it, to have their librarians ask us to leave the property. We did again. Now this backtrack, if you will, just happened late last week. I believe it was Friday. But we did have people at the libraries doing exactly the same thing on Election Day. They stayed outside of the 100-foot markers, even though that's not necessarily required for what we were doing.
Because you weren't on the ballot.
That's right. We were not on the ballot. But to avoid any type of confrontation, our petitioners at the libraries on Election Day stayed outside of the 100-foot marker. Once again, at several libraries, they were asked to leave. Once again, Bill Elshire encouraged the city, just pleaded with the city, let's sit down, let's work this out. Ultimately, like I say, Friday of last week, they sent out a letter temporarily rescinding that order or that request to have their librarians to ask our people leave the property. That's not anything permanent. They plan on meeting, I think the next library commission meeting is the 26th, and they're going to have it on their agenda to decide where they want to go from here. But for right now, we can work the libraries.
Well, it sounds like just a number of things they're doing to stall your petition. And to interfere with the petition, I guess now there's a talk that the petition may try to invalidate the petition.
That comes as no surprise. They've done, throughout the 6 months we've been very actively working this, most of the little roadblocks and issues that have come up have been relatively minor. This is a major challenge, if you will. They have not taken a firm position. The city staff has not taken a firm position. The council has not taken a firm position on how they will react to the petition when we file, if it is validated, and that looks extremely likely. This petition drive is extraordinarily likely to be successful. They knew for some time what the contents of the petition were, what the ins and outs of it were, and what statutes we were basing the petition on. They hired outside counsel. They went to an outside law firm here in Austin to seek an opinion as to whether or not our petition was valid. They got the answer that they wanted. Their attorney cited what they felt was some state statutes to basically nullify our petition, and telling the city that they would not be required to order it on the ballot in November, even if we successfully met the requirements. Our attorneys feel completely differently, and I believe, having looked at the information on both sides, this is strictly a personal opinion, that we have the far stronger position on this. And even just from political realities, when you choose to ignore 28, 29, by the time we get finished, possibly 30,000 signatures asking to have this put on the ballot, I think you do so at some political risk.
Well, our city council's become
whole
very
lot of
brazen. They're not shy about, they know what's best for us.
Absolutely.
In every step of the way. I mean, Code Next is supposed to be a collaboration, but with the paid sick leave, there was they're just gonna ram things through.
Yep.
And that's
So basically, the city is trying to sabotage the whole process.
Yes.
That's what's going on right now.
Yes, and they were well aware of what the contents of the petition were and on what statutes we based our right to petition to put Code Next on a ballot for the people to have a right to vote on it. They could have chosen for months to say, we're going to try to invalidate this, we're going to try to nullify your petition. Frankly, I think they had little expectation that we'd actually get the number of signatures. Now that looks like it's almost a done deal. We can't petition it. We can't petition at the libraries, and they want to challenge the validity of our petition.
How did you accomplish that? Is there already a lot of backing for what it is that you're trying to accomplish?
With the petition,
Lots of block walking and stuff like
lots
that?
of block
Town
walking.
hall meetings and stuff?
It took every form. We've had people block walking.
That's not chump change. That's a lot of signatures.
No, I've done this before, and if anyone ever thinks that collecting 20,000 plus signatures is an easy task,
No.
try it.
I didn't even know that many people.
the library may have helped you.
I
You
think
got a lot of free publicity.
we did.
But I mean, I think we went over a little bit this last time. Your petition doesn't. You're not petitioning to completely invalidate and throw Code Next out with the bathwater.
No, the petition in its simplest form, and this is really what it's all about, and I spent a lot of time collecting signatures during early voting on an election day. I'm pretty proud of my numbers. But the petition is merely to put the right to vote on Code Next on the ballot on November. Now, people, if it passes, then ultimately at some future opportunity, typically within the next 12 to 24 months, when Code Next is a finished product, then the citizens would have approved the right to vote on the content of Code Next. And it will in all likelihood be an up or down vote. It's not designed. It would not be the intention, I'm getting a little ahead of the game here, but it would not be the intention to take Code Next apart piece by piece by piece. Having said that, if we get it on the ballot in November, citizens decide they want a right to vote on it, and then at some future point, Code Next is on the ballot and the voters turn it down, then there's opportunities to take that Code Next, pull out what's good, what works, remove those things that are objectionable to the vast majority of the city, rework it, make something that we can use that's not as destructive to neighborhoods and actually could pass a vote of the public. So our intention is not to cut Code Next up. It's to give citizens a chance to vote on it.
Yeah. But have you ever thought of a different strategy in terms of, let's say, if the city, because it seems like the city is trying to sabotage your effort, have you thought of maybe taking up to the state? Maybe the state somebody in the state legislature can look at it, maybe offer a bill more or less that will more or less undo
there any-
what Code Next is doing.
Is
Like
there
rideshare.
jurisdiction
Exactly.
of state reps and stuff in that area?
Well, obviously, there are, due to gerrymandering, there are a number of state legislatures who represent various little pieces of Austin. And I would not be the least bit surprised. I mean, we have meetings regularly. I would not be the least bit surprised if there's not some state legislature intervention on this at the next session. Next year. It wouldn't shock me, just like the mandated paid sick time.
Or the ride share, what happened with the ride share already?
That's right. There are things that the state legislature certainly has the power to intervene on if they choose to do that. This is not quite the same clear-cut case it would be with perhaps the Uber Lyft situation or paid sick leave. This is going to be a little bit more of a gray area, but that doesn't stop the legislature from intervening in a lot of things. So.
If they take your petition, who writes the ballot language? Is it on your petition, the ballot language?
It is not on the petition. It is
That's
not.
what they did with rideshare, was convoluted ballot
So where
language.
do they read the details and stuff?
on the
Petition and stuff like that?
You can. I'll refer our viewers to the indyaustin.org site. You can go through there.
Austin.org.
That's INDY, austin.org. There's a lot of information there that you can review, explaining some of the details about Code Next and about the petition drive. Also, there's another very active organization, Community Not Commodity. You can look them up on Facebook and website.
Interesting.
I like the choice of words there, but both Community Not Commodity and Indy Austin have a lot of material that you can review, and like you said, there's the ballot language is critical. That is generally written by city staff, by city attorneys. They review it to make sure that, in their opinion, it's legal, and we'll deal with that when we get to it.
Yeah. We have a couple of faces, new faces are here now.
Miss Marilyn.
Marilyn,
Well, no, I apologize for being late, but my co-host here, she knows exactly what to do. And thank you for being here.
Sure.
Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
Thanks for being here.
Sure.
Also,
what was your name again? I'm sorry, what was your name again?
Jude.
Jude,
I call
Jude,
you
okay,
Jude.
Jude.
You said that so quickly.
One other thing. Okay, we have got to get something done. You know why? Coming over here, they've taken away all the lanes and made them into a bike lane.
Well,
So
that-
can you imagine all the traffic to the back? So I'm telling you, we've got to get this thing under control because
That's your mobility bond money, that's 720 million for mobility?
Yes.
It's for bikes and pedestrians to be mobile, not cars. Didn't you know that?
I'm feeling it every
that?
single time.
Austin.
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 But you know, when we talked last time, I said, you know what? We have got to stand up and do something.
Yes, absolutely.
Because the quickest thing to do is say, I'm out of here.
Right.
And for what? For them to really let them take over completely? And that's exactly what they want to do, and it wouldn't matter to them if we left or not. If we're in the way, they're going to take it. We've
There's a
got
whole
to
lot
do
of
something.
transplants here too.
Yes.
They're like a transplant boost.
Oh, yes.
Well,
Last maybe decade.
I agree with you. I
Like
think
a huge boost.
that Code Next. I've lived in Austin 34 years. I'm not a native. Steal the old expression. I got here as soon as I could. It was a nice. I really enjoyed moving here from Houston in 1983. And I've always been politically active, particularly now that I'm retired. But I've watched so many things go through the councils over the years, and I cannot remember anything that approaches the impact that any prior ordinance, bond, nothing approaches the impact that Code Next will have on Austin. It's going to shape Austin's growth for the next 30 to 50 years. Nothing else has come even remotely close to that kind of impact.
Maybe,
That's a very bold statement to make. I think that we really need to break that down if you don't.
Okay.
I mean, in like layman's terms.
Well, when you completely rewrite a top to bottom citywide rewrite of all of the zoning codes and land use regulations, there are very few exceptions to that. You basically shape what's going to happen on every parcel of land in this city, and the general motivation behind Code Next is to add density That's one of its primary goals. And it has,
Without like infrastructure growth?
the infrastructure, I don't know that the infrastructure can grow to keep up with it,
Well,
but we
that's what I'm
want,
saying.
we want to try to put, the idea with Code Next is to try and put, to say it as just at point blank, put as many people in as small a space as
Yeah.
possible.
The mobility
Oh my
bond was a
gosh.
part, it was a preface
I believe it was.
to Code Next.
Yes.
To changing Lamar, some of my main arteries.
Yes.
It was a preface to
So
it.
does this affect Austin as a whole, or more some parts more than
That's
others?
a very reasonable and fair question. On paper, Code Next affects virtually all of Austin. The reality is that a lot of the variables, market demand will almost certainly mean that some areas of Austin are going to be far more affected than others. I think I can say that without fear of having to correct myself at some point in the future. East Austin, well, if you want to think of it this way, Austin uses has used for as far back as I can remember, and many decades before that, what we call a growth pattern is called a hub and spoke, and I won't get into the weeds on how that works, but it basically, downtown is the center of everything. And as you populate downtown and you've kind of reached capacity, the hub and spoke system is, well, you have another concentric circle, and you add density inside that concentric circle. And then when you
And so
can't
that's happened.
when you can't do that anymore, you add another concentric circle. So it's like a
Which circle are
growing
we at? The
bullseye.
third one? Are we at the third
We're
circle
probably
by
at the
now, you
third one,
think?
probably hitting the third
I
one.
think
Yeah.
we're at the third.
I think a good way to explain how this is going to affect people is this. Say you live in a neighborhood a couple of miles from downtown,
Yeah.
and your neighbor has a lot same size as yours. Well, your neighbor sells to a developer, and that your houses are both worth $300,000. Your neighbor sells, they tear down his house and they build 2 to 3 units on that are each worth $300,000 now because they go up. So now that property next to you is worth $900,000. What happens in a market-based property tax system? Your values automatically go up, even though you didn't do anything to your house.
That's right.
The value of property in your neighborhood has increased. So with density in the east side, you're going to push more and more and more people out.
Yeah,
It's
they seem to be pigeonholed more and more and more so.
Well, developers
Stuff.
are going to put the property where they think they can get the best price for it, and you don't build an expensive property in the middle of nowhere. You put it next to another expensive property. That's what happens within these concentric circles. You fill that in. You replace existing properties if there's any what we call infill or green space left. That's a property that has nothing on it. You put the most expensive thing you can as long as there's market demand for it. And with Austin's growth rate, it's there. So you'll see expensive housing continue to go up as long as people will pay for it, either renting or, and I say that, I stress renting or buying. And as this concentric circle moves out, you basically displace the people that are there that can no longer afford the property taxes. And it's just kind of a vicious cycle, but Code Next really sets up sets up a scenario where that's likely to happen. So, where I live near Mopac and Palmer, yes, our zoning codes will change. The changes will be modest. There will be we will see some of that, but the closer you get to downtown, that would be East Austin, North Central Austin, those areas are the next concentric circle, and they're the ones that are going to be the most significantly impacted.
Well, they say with the problems with our current land codes is we have all these overlays. You go to the planning commission, they give you an exception or something. What do they think this is not going to happen again?
Well, the idea is to get away from that by baking into the legal term is by right. When the zoning codes are rewritten, and we can see that in what's available for us to review now with draft 3, the entitlements for a given zoning code have been greatly expanded in many cases. What that means is you don't have to ask anybody for anything anymore. You don't need those overlays. You don't need those variances. You don't need those zoning changes. They will, by right, be baked into the code. So it's a done deal. I buy this property.
Developer's dream.
It is. And another.
Is this not some sort of, to me it seems like some sort of weird, subtle form of gerrymandering a little bit.
You could look at it that way. It's a socioeconomic gerrymandering rather than political.
It does look like that.
It-
It looks like
it-
it from
it-
the outside looking in.
It has the same kind of effect. It really does.
And I'm sure it does have a political impact to it too, because I'm sure all of city council, they agree and they partner with this.
Well, and that's that's strictly personal opinion, but there's a lot of pressure on city council from the lobbyists, from those who make money off of changes that occur in the city, and Code Next is really a potential multi-billion-dollar change to the city over the next several decades. And when that kind of money is on the table or about to be on the table, you got big players coming in using every bit of influence they can to have things go their way. I mean, that sounds pretty cynical, but
No.
frankly, I think that's just an honest viewpoint. At least it's mine.
Isn't there a case also they're talking about now with our planning commission, which has to approve Code Next?
Right.
That we have too many
Developers?
developers on the planning commission that have a stake in
You're-
it, which
you-
is against the charter?
I'm glad you brought that up.
Like a conflict of interest?
Yeah.
It is. It is. Now, and again, we talked earlier about the things that the city is doing to perhaps slow down the petition drive. It's been in the press lately that the planning commission is not properly constituted. The people that are on it there are some that should not be there. There's too many people that represent real estate interest. Now, that's been in the press lately, and there's a suggestion that those of us who are behind the petition brought that up just recently to say, well, that's just another reason why the playing field's not level. The fact of the matter is, a very politically active attorney by the name of Fred Lewis brought up the problems with those sitting on the planning commission 3 or 4 years ago. It is set by city charter that there has to be a limit to the number of people who sit on the planning commission who have direct ties or even somewhat indirect ties who could potentially financially benefit from real estate activity. And for some time, there have been far too many people on the planning commission who, in fact, are tied to the real estate industry. But this problem is not new. This has been around for 3 or 4 years. It's not something that we've just recently brought up. It's just made the media lately, but it's
Just
been
shows
around.
where the deck is stacked.
It is. And what's really interesting is the planning commission has been largely pro-Code Next. The zoning and planning commission, which are the people that sit on that commission, are appointed by the council members. They have been extraordinarily skeptical of Code Next. You have two commissions who I don't think it's unfair to say have taken very different views of Code Next as to how it will impact the city. One, the zoning and planning commission is primarily staffed by, if you want to call it that, by people who are put there by council members who are a little more tied to the interest of the part of the city that they live in.
Yeah. Well, I think, too, also, people, want to get help. Also, the Austin Neighborhood Council
Right?
is very opposed.
Yeah, that would be an understatement.
Yeah, well, yeah.
They've taken a position very strongly opposed to it. And I don't know that they actually have anything official that they parade around or they distribute that says they're opposed to it. They may. Don't take that as a they don't have it. But for many, many months, they've been gravely concerned about the effects of Code Next. And I know they've ratcheted up their rhetoric a little bit here lately.
So do you know,
Yeah.
do you have a plan for how you're going to get the rest of your signatures that you need?
Work hard. I haven't got the numbers yet. We had a lot of people out at Barton Springs Pool over the weekend. I haven't seen the numbers come in from that yet to add to what I mentioned earlier. After early voting and election day, I believe we were right around 27,500.
This is a tough week.
If we had a good day at Barton Springs, we probably added significantly to that number, and we're working the libraries again. Our goal is to walk into the city clerk's office on the 22nd of this month with 28,500 or more. Now, we shoot for that number for a lot of reasons, which I mentioned. With the validation rate that we have, we think with 28.5, we'll have enough validated signatures to considerably exceed the 20,000 that we are required to have.
And you'll know if they mess around. You've already validated at least 20, so you know if,
It's,
you know.
I've been on petition drives before, and good ones always walk into the clerk's office, whether it's the county or the city, and say, we got it. And you're not going to be surprised because you've done the work. It's a lot of work to validate all those signatures.
Yeah.
So what do you think, Jude?
Yeah. What I want to say, I want to ask you a question about this signature thing.
Mm-hmm.
I've keenly followed this code next of a thing, and it is anti-Austinites, especially those on the east side.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of years ago, students' apartments that were rented out for $350 are now like over $500.
Mm-hmm.
And even apartments, you know, the rents kept going up. And I see all these companies coming down, building big structures, which is making those side of town very expensive for the people that live there, you know. Talking about the signature, I would like to work with you closely on that.
Please.
That on my part, I can talk to people and make them see the need for such signature. You know, I love to find myself in situations like this. I want to.
I bet Ed will give you some petition sheets to take around and get signatures.
I am never without them. I have them
If
with
you
me at
do-
all times.
Yeah, if you do,
I will.
I'll have some today.
Very
And,
good.
I know, based on my persuasive abilities, I can talk to people. Look, let's be the mediating generation, because if we don't do this now, it will affect
Yeah.
people, and people will
Yes.
continue to be displaced.
Yeah.
And that's how people go to nearby towns and cities, you know, living there.
Well,
And-
for Adele, you're active in Lockhart.
Adela.
Adela, sorry.
That's okay.
If Code Next is going to drive people and it's going to raise cost of living in Lockhart, people are going to move further and further out.
Yeah.
Bastrop
Right.
already has gone
Oh,
to the press
yes.
about that issue.
Yeah.
Lockhart, all these surrounding towns like Manor.
And it's too expensive to live in Manor now.
Yeah.
Elgin too.
So I
We could
mean,
use the growth though in my
it
town.
affects
But the rates are going to
But
go
the-
up. The property.
the property taxes.
Oh, our
every-
whole budget needs reallocation. It's ridiculous. So.
Okay,
So,
so
I mean,
tell
it
me this.
affects more people.
It will,
than-
and it will push them out. And so you'll have more people coming to your town, is what he's saying. Some unwillingly, and
You'll
you
get
know,
transplants.
yeah, you
Oh,
will.
No, no.
California,
There's
you
more
will.
Californians than Texans. But
Coming.
when I ask who's from where in Austin, I'm like, there's a lot more from California than Texas. I'm like,
And the people from Chicago
oh
are
my
coming too.
gosh.
When you,
oh my
you
gosh.
20 years ago, you asked somebody, are you from Austin? Yes. Now that's a
No.
unicorn. That's the term now. If you're from Austin, you're a unicorn.
They call it
They're a
unicorn.
mythical beast.
Snowflakes, unicorn.
You know, it's
Oh my
it's
goodness.
Austin is a melting pot. Just in 15 years, maybe it has changed so much, and that's what scares me about this is we saw it with that education bond, $1 billion, 65%. They have now got enough transplants to pass whatever agenda they want, and that's what is really worrying me. I mean, y'all are working hard to get the petitions. I just don't want to see it get run over.
Now, Ed, tell us, is there a part of the city in Austin that's going to be affected some of the most that you haven't gotten a chance to get out to?
No, I think we've done, and this is just my opinion. I've been primarily coordinating all of the activity in near North Central, just say between Lamar and Burnett, all the way from about 38th up to the city limits on the north side. That's been the area I've been focusing in, but working with the volunteers, elections,
Where
and
should I
whatnot.
take my petitions?
But you can give them to me. And
No, where should I take them? Where should I go to get my petition signed?
anywhere you want to, because
Okay.
that's the
I
that's
just
the
want to go to a place where the need is, where I can
the-
get some
the-
attention to.
that's
District
that's sort of
six,
the beauty of this petition drive in one respect,
affect
and it affects the entire city. Generally, where people congregate and have had seen the effects of gentrification, they're going to generally be very good listeners. And we have had a very good presence in East Austin. We've had a lot of folks working with us there. I have not, like I say, my time and attention has been focused on North Central Austin, but we've had a lot of folks working in all over the
So you
city.
need like a District 3 ally.
A District 3 ally.
Because it seems like everybody's being pigeonholed into District 3 and on the east side of Austin.
Carmen Yanis Polito, Daniel Yanis. There's a number of people. I think Gavino. I think Casey was here. Casey was here. There's a 3 or 4 people I can think of off the top of my head. Those that are working in Southeast Austin in various capacities to
I think
promote the
that's
drive.
stronger with the community, not commodity, right?
They are, and it never was planned to have Indy Austin work one area of the city and community, not commodity, work another. But when you start reaching out to volunteers to help you, it kind of has a snowball effect. If you're really committed to what you're doing and you bring in other committed people, they tend to kind of they ask for help from people they know, which often are people who from the same part of town. So our snowball kind of started rolling on the north end of town was primarily Indy Austin people. And Community Not Commodity when they started reaching out, they started getting their initial strong response from East Austin, and it kind of snowballs. But there's no boundaries here, nothing like that. We work all over town. And Jude, you raise a good point that I've made in a lot of presentations, and it's extraordinarily simple, but I think it kind of drives home a very important point, and that is that with Code Next, there's no do-over. If we pass this and this process starts, you'll see the serious and long-lasting effects of it probably within 3 to 5 years. And once that process has begun, you don't go back. Once these high rises, these expensive apartments, the expensive homes are built, what do you do in 5 years and say, "Oh, we made a horrible mistake, tear your house down"? I mean, we will live with the consequences of Code Next, good or bad, for generations to come. There's not a do-over available here. You don't back up.
We already have a problem with neighborhoods, the houses with character being torn down for square boxes. And you drive through town, like off South First and Otor. They tear down a house that had character, that a family was probably generations lived in, and they build a couple of square 3-story things,
Straight up.
Like apartments or something?
condos. No, they
Or
build
duplexes
3
or
square houses on one property.
Yes.
And
weird.
we think it's weird.
But it's a
know?
moneymaker.
But it's a moneymaker because they buy a property for $300 and they sell each of those for $250. It's $750,000. I mean, the math is there. They make them.
That's right.
It's an investment. The investors are what's really, this is a big Code Nexus for the investors.
Well, it is. Now, if things don't go right, and in 3 to 5 years, the ones that have been at the head of this whole thing, they'll just skedaddle and go to another city and do the same thing.
That's the fear, and I can't off the top of my head cite you examples where that's happened before, but I think it's likely that if things go sour, those people that are no longer going to make megabucks off of Austin,
gone.
they'll find someplace else to do the
Well,
same
and I'm
thing.
sure they left someplace before they came here.
I think if you track the history of a lot of them,
Yeah.
and I have no basis to make that statement, but my gut tells me that if you track the history of a lot of these builders, that's exactly what you find in some cases. Yeah.
My common sense tells me
Yeah.
that too.
Yeah.
It's not a good thing that. It's not a good thing. We've got to do something about this for sure.
Well, and one of the things that just as sort of this thing has Code Next, and it has a lot of ramifications. There's a lot of consequences, and we have become a tech city. I mean, when I moved here, it was either it was UT and city and state government, primarily the state and UT. And I moved here just as the tech industry was beginning to get a foothold, and of course we know what's happened since the mid-'80s. And one of the things that just sort of I find a little puzzling when I'm doing presentations, because I hear all kinds of questions from a wide variety of perspectives, is there seems to be sort of a belief that the tech party never ends. I assure you that all industries have cycles. The tech industry is no exception to that. I lived in Austin for 3 downturns, long enough to see 3 downturns. Now, the first one was generally initiated by the savings and loan crisis, but I've seen 2 tech downturns here. And when a city becomes so committed to and so economically dependent on one industry, when it takes a downturn, it will not be pretty. And it's not an if, it's a when. And when you have this inflated these inflated property prices, the collapse will be astounding. It will take your breath away. My only hope is that when this occurs, that it's gradual and it's modest, so that the city would have time to deal with the consequences. And if it's a rapid and severe downturn, it will get very ugly around here.
How do you think the city would deal with something like this should it happen?
Well,
We have a new city manager.
And the city is limited in what it can do.
Exactly.
And having seen the city react to 3 previous downturns, typically you have to go through some pretty severe belt tightening. There are layoffs. There are significantly reduced funds for things that people really enjoy and expect. So a lot of social services get cut, are very, very limited. It's the more severe consequences, and think about just the collapse of 2008. You have people who've moved in and they've paid $750,000 for a property. They've only been in it for a few years. They don't have a lot of. If you've ever bought a home, you know that the first, say on a 30-year mortgage, the first 15 or 20 years, you don't own a lot of that house. Your piece of the pie is very small. You go in, you buy a $750,000 house, and there's a severe economic downturn, and your house is now worth $450,000, and you're out of a job because you just got laid off at some tech firm. You're in a world of hurt. I saw it in my own neighborhood a couple of times because I live between IBM and what used to be Texas Instruments. They're no longer there, and
And a couple of times,
people had to
too.
walk away from their homes because the only way they could get rid of the home was to go to the table with $20,000 or $30,000. Bear in mind, prices were a little lower back then, and pay somebody to take their home off of their hands. So you had a heck of a lot of
Well,
foreclosures.
in the 80s, there would be 40 people applying for a minimum wage job.
I remember it.
Yeah.
It got ugly.
That was the Nash Phillips Copus, the housing with the savings alone. All those homes that went bankrupt, belly up, they were building those tract homes, MPC homes all over town.
The first neighborhood I lived in was an NPC neighborhood. We rented a house for a year and a half, and then we ended up buying a Bill Milburn home, which was about this much of a step above an NPC house. I'm still there.
What you talk about was kind of in the news today. The generation that's moving to Austin, we now have more student loan debt than credit card debt in the nation. We're $1.5 trillion. So that's the generation that's moving to Austin, the young tech generation who have borrowed $1.5 trillion for those educations. The state, the nation, 1.5 trillion in student loan debt. That's the next bubble, perhaps.
It's certainly something to be concerned about.
Yeah.
Well, all the South by Southwest revenue that comes in, I would hope and pray that they put this money up for a rainy
No,
day.
it goes to the convention center. That goes to the
The
tourists.
city gets something.
The convention center.
Well, one of the things,
That's the city.
a lot of people that know me and listen to me gab. I'm often negative on things that the city does, and I think for good reason. But I do think the city does make some smart moves, and one of the things that they have done now with South by Southwest is, instead of all of the money going specifically for the convention center and tourist promotion, they're actually they have a dedicated portion of the South by South revenue now paying for the police, firefighters.
They have to.
I wasn't alone for years. I thought there were quite a few avenues to have a for-profit, a very profitable for-profit venture pay for city services rather than us giving them $1 million worth of free services, and it was certainly at that mark more than once. Now at least, I don't know if they cover all of the cost of the city services. That may be the case, but at least it's paying for the vast majority of
A
it.
lot
They're-
of
they're-
overtime.
Well, I know they talked about the overtime. They talked
Yeah.
about how much it was last
Right.
time, and they still didn't quite have the budget for this time.
And you
Or
could-
to say how much.
You could think about another turn down that could happen. In Austin, our tourism dependency is massive now. Look what happened to Vegas after 9/11,
Mhm.
when nobody wanted to fly for months. We have so much tourism here. Imagine if that happens in Austin. I mean, we're pretty galvanized, but not as galvanized as we'd like to be probably. And one of these, anything happens like that with what's happening with Code Next, and all these people are building these big properties, it'll crush the market here.
Well, I had relatives, they're no longer there. They've passed away and the living relatives have moved out, but I had a lot of relatives living in Las Vegas at one point in time. And my mother-in-law and father-in-law, may they rest in peace, bought a house there many, many years ago for square footage-wise, price-wise, was very comparable to what I bought here in Austin. And they went through the housing bubble there. As Vegas became more and more popular and more family friendly. Of course, at one time it was pretty much just a gambling town, but it certainly has changed dramatically over the last 15 or 20 years. And people moved in to take jobs. The housing market there absolutely skyrocketed. And in 2008, when things fell apart, the financial markets fell apart. If I remember correctly, Las Vegas was the hardest hit city in the United States. A home there lost 65 to 70% of its value. So if you had purchased anything in about the previous 15 years, you were underwater. If you're familiar with that expression, you owed more on your house than it was worth. You were underwater so far you weren't going to see daylight for a long time.
And we're almost a mirror
And
of that.
We're becoming that here in Austin. If prices here collapse, those people that have bought these overpriced properties are going to be in serious trouble unless they have a job.
Something to think about.
It is.
It really
and
is.
for me, that's why I think this Code Next and this density, and I understand the purpose of density and with transportation, but I think this needs to be slowed down.
I think so too, because Adela mentioned infrastructure. We don't have the infrastructure for it.
That's right.
And when you bring so many people in and things begin to go wrong, then all the crime and other things begin to happen. It's not a cool thing.
Well, crime is up now.
Yeah.
How many shootings have we had? This morning we had bombings
Yes,
in Austin,
bombings.
Texas.
That's tragic. And
By the way, people, if you have a package at your door,
If you're not
if
expecting
you
it
don't
anyway.
expect that package, don't touch it.
that's a tragic situation I would have never thought would have happened here.
Yes.
It's
Very
truly
strange. I'm really hoping they get to the bottom of it.
Yes,
unfortunate.
quickly.
Who would leave that on somebody's doorstep overnight?
Well, and to kind of kick it back to Code Next, I think the point that I try to make whenever I can, a lot of people who are working on this petition drive and others who are just interested in Code Next, is that we're dealing with a 1984 set of code right now, which has been amended. There's a lot of errors, a lot of inconsistencies. Those of us who follow the zoning changes across the city, there's almost universal recognition that we need new code. We need it cleaned up. We need it streamlined. We need a better permitting process. But there are many ways to do that. Code Next only presents one option, and it's a pretty dramatic option. There are other options available. I mentioned the hub and spoke system, which is basically where a city grows with everything focused downtown, and your major arteries feed your traffic and your employees into downtown. Another system that's used is a node system, where you have concentrated areas of housing and employment, services. And I'll give you an example. We have one fairly good example. It's not perfect, and one slightly less good example, but the Domain. If you've ever been out to the Domain.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it wasn't originally built as what we call a node, a density node, but it incorporates so many of the same things. You have housing, you have services, you have employment. You basically can exist in that area without having to travel out of it or very far if you don't want to.
Right.
The Mueller development is not quite the same
It's-
complete.
It's just about
close.
though, huh?
It's getting to be sort of a.
Well, they got
Domain.
HEB,
In
they got,
smart growth, I think they're called urban villages.
It goes by different
But you
names.
could,
which is,
which is something we've, I ran for the city council in District 3, and that's where we need to put our affordable housing. Give them a school, build some, and that doesn't have to be in the middle of town. Of course, now they want to put them on the west side of town, affordable housing on the west side of town, but build these urban villages with everything you need.
That's it. That's a very different approach than the hub and spoke system. If you want to keep people off the roads, if you have a traffic problem, do what you need to do to keep them off the roads, which is to provide a concentrated density center that has almost everything they need, and they
Yeah.
don't have to drive downtown to get services that are not available in their neighborhood.
You remember in the 80s in Austin, though, you lived where you worked. You worked where
You
you
could
lived.
then.
If you lived north, you probably worked north
Right.
somewhere in a tech, IBM or something. If you lived south,
Yeah.
you probably worked south.
yeah,
That's gone. I mean,
That's
it's gone.
difficult to do anymore.
And now
It
that we've
is.
priced so many people out, they're moving to the suburbs, Bastrop, Lockhart, Kyle, Buda, and driving in.
yes. And that's more,
And that's just
traffic.
There's your
that's-
traffic. We haven't done any infrastructure.
No.
183 now is being done, and that's the first thing we've done in 15 years since they did 183 in Ben White.
It's
They ran out of money when it came to the east side.
Well,
It's just the truth.
They just want you
They,
to bicycle.
across the Montopolis Bridge, but because of the toll road coming in, you found some money.
But 183 North, I'm talking where
Oh.
it used to be light to light.
Well,
Ben
yes.
White used to be light to light. They made it a freeway. Wow, man, you could fly. And 183 North was light to light.
oh, I remember
Yes.
it well.
Well, but they ran out of money when it came to 183 South. I mean, there was
I don't know
no.
whatever happened to 183 South because the company
Well,
I
that
worked
and
for,
Ed Bluestein so east. So Ed
Yeah.
Bluestein, they ran out of money when it came to that.
it's a mess.
It's a mess now. It's a mess. So one thing I want to do you have a petition?
I don't have a blank.
You
with-
don't have a
I
blank one?
blanks. They're in the car, but I do.
Oh, I wanted to see wanted to show the people on the show. I want to sign the petition now.
Oh,
So
darn.
that we can get this party started.
Well, just promise that you're
even
going to do
more.
that, and I'll vouch for you.
I'm going to sign that petition today
Okay.
before I leave.
Thank you very
Sign.
much. Yes, I
And
have some.
Jude will sign as well.
I know.
Take
Give you some.
blanks.
Take some blanks.
I've got some blanks.
Take some blanks.
I'm going to take them to church with me
There you go.
and get them signed.
There you
So
go.
even if you'll still accept them, even if it's after the 22nd?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's. I'm glad you brought that up.
Mm-hmm.
Even after we formally file, we will be happy to and encourage people to sign the petition. Why? Because it continues to send the message that people want to vote on this.
Thank you.
It could be June, July, August. If you want to sign the petition, if we're out collecting petitions, signatures, and you see us and you want to sign, do so. Because even though once we file, that package, if you will, is basically a done deal. You can't subtract from it or add to it after that point in time. If you're continuing to add to that signature count, you're sending a message to council that, hey, we're not going to roll over and go to sleep here. We're not done. We still have more and more and more people that want to see an opportunity to vote on this.
And you have another special election. That's a captive registered audit.
It-
No, they're registered.
It is. And I just tell you, I had a lot of fun. I worked the Ben-Hur Shrine Temple location, early voting location. It's very close to where the old North Cross Mall used to be, what remains of it now. And we had a really good time there. We had to fight a lot of raindrops the first week. It got much better the second. And I was there pretty much all day, every day. And I had some help in the afternoons. And we collected, this is early voting, 875 signatures.
Whoa, that was awesome.
800.
Y'all
and
was
Those are
working. That
guaranteed
was
in the bank.
awesome.
we were working.
So because you know they were voters.
on election day, we collected 201. So
Wow.
on that, at that one voting location, early voting and election day, we gathered over 1,000 signatures. And I'll tell you what, it was a lot of fun. But when you had just all it took was about 60 seconds for me to, if someone would stop and talk, explain what we were trying to do. I'd say about 80 or 90% of the people signed the petition. So it was just one right after another, after another,
That is
after
good.
Just
another.
trying to
That's
give
good.
people their vote.
That's
Yes.
it. It's
Their
Yes.
voice.
Tell them, how do you wrap it all in a nice, pretty bow?
You want to hear my little spiel?
Of
Yeah.
course, we've got a few minutes left, so now would be a great
I
time.
know, I got to keep practicing here because we do have some special elections coming up. I would normally say, thank you for voting today. Have you had an opportunity to sign the petition to put Code Next on a ballot so you actually have a chance to vote on it? Now, some people knew what it was and some didn't, and I'll give you the extra sentence or two. They said, well, what is Code Next? Code Next is a citywide, top-to-bottom rewrite of the zoning codes and land use regulations that will determine how Austin is going to grow for the next 30 to 50 years. It's a big deal. And nowhere in this process do the citizens get to vote on this to decide if this is good or bad for Austin. Our petition is not for or against Code Next. We simply want to put it on the ballot so you have that chance to vote on it.
That's a
you
good
go.
spiel.
And I would hold
I'm
that
sold.
clipboard up there and I want to sign that.
Yes.
That's why I say, if you just explain that this is a matter of democracy, I'm not personally out here to tell you that Code Next is the worst thing to ever happen in the world. You make that decision for yourself.
Yes.
But you can't make that decision if you don't have a right to vote on it.
Yes.
You can sell glasses to a blind man.
I
Good.
was,
You know the cliche of about planning to fail and you fail if you don't plan.
That's
and
it.
I understand what it means to plan in advance, and I admire the city for planning in advance about our growth.
Right.
But let us in on it.
Yeah.
But when you do, don't take it away, everything that we've said, and throw it and do what you want to do on your agenda.
Right. Couldn't
You know?
agree with you more.
it's a big issue. It's a big issue. I wanted to ask Adela, is there anything big happening in Lockhart? I mean, I'm sure we have people.
Like specifically for my town?
For your town, I mean, for you, we just had elections. You were talking a little bit ago.
Well, right now we're in the throes of runoff. We're in throes of runoffs, and those are pretty. Actually, I'm compiling questions right now for our commissioner and our county judge. It's not like Austin in that it's very Democrats and Republicans. I mean, we all coach each other's kids. Our kids go to school together, whatever. So we go to church together. So it's way different. I mean, there's so much voter apathy there. I'm hoping I can pull some of that back, but
Wow.
nothing like yay exciting.
Oh, you have any announcements right quick? Because we're going to go off the air. Will you have something you want to
All I can
announce?
say is, and I can't stress this enough, if you have
Find the petition.
if you have any, we know there are hundreds, if not thousands, of petition blanks floating around out there. If you set it down on the kitchen table, on your couch, your end table, and you haven't done anything with it, thinking I'll do it tomorrow. Tomorrow was yesterday. We need them in.
Yes.
Fill out the required information, the date, a printed name, a signature, your street, your zip code, and either your date of birth or your voter registration number. There's a mailing address in the bottom right-hand corner. Invest in your future, spend a stamp, the money for a stamp, put it in an envelope, and get it in the mail right now.
And you're not shy. You'll take it with one signature.
Oh,
Doesn't have to
absolutely.
be full because
Oh, no,
they'll
that's-
get two or three and go, oh, I don't. That's just two or.
No,
Anything.
one signature, every signature counts. If you've got one on a blank, that we want it. If you've got 10 on a blank, we want that too.
Well, we thank you for coming on again. I know those three headlines had me so confused, and it's kind of changed when it came to this show. We do not have a show on the 26th. So next week will be about we're about to go off. Black Panther next week. Anyway, bye-bye, folks.